Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that everything you thought would make you happy didn't. Not the promotions, not the corner office, not even the perfect relationship. The real happiness came from something so simple, it almost feels embarrassing to admit. It came from finally belonging to yourself. I'm talking to someone right now who knows exactly what that means. You've spent 40, maybe 50 years building a life that looked good on paper. You showed up, you did what was expected. You met the deadlines, raised the kids, paid the bills, and never complained about it too loudly. You learned early that being reliable meant being useful, and being useful meant being loved. At least that's what you told yourself. But here's what nobody tells you about that arrangement. Every single day you spend meeting someone else's expectations is a day you're not asking yourself what you actually want. And somewhere around your 60th birthday, something strange starts happening. You notice it in small moments at first. You wake up one morning and realize you're tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. The kind of tired that comes from carrying weight that was never really yours to begin with. Think about what your life has looked like. You probably started working young, maybe straight out of school or after college. That job wasn't just a job. It became your identity. People knew you as the guy who worked hard, who got things done, who could be counted on. That felt good for a while. There was a clear purpose. You were building something. Then maybe you got married, or the kids came, and suddenly your responsibilities multiplied overnight. You weren't just earning a living anymore. You were providing for people, protecting them, fixing their problems, being strong when they needed strength. Years passed. You became so skilled at living this way that you stopped noticing how much of yourself was disappearing. You learned to keep quiet when you wanted to speak up. You learned to prioritize other people's needs so automatically that your own needs began to feel selfish. You learned to carry tension in your shoulders and stress in your chest without even realizing it was there. This became normal. This became life. Then something unexpected happens, usually around 60, sometimes before, sometimes after. The rules change. Your kids grow up and move out. They don't need you to solve their problems anymore. Your career starts shifting. Maybe you're thinking about retirement, or maybe you've already made the leap. The constant pressure that shaped your entire adult life begins to ease. And for the first time in decades, you experience something foreign, quiet. Here's the thing about quiet that nobody expects. At first, it feels wrong. Some men mistake it for loneliness. They panic because they've spent so many years believing that being alone automatically means something is missing. They rush to fill the silence with noise, with new relationships, with new projects, with anything to avoid sitting with themselves. But the men who stop fighting it, who give themselves permission to actually experience that quiet, they discover something remarkable. That silence isn't empty. It's peaceful. It's the first real peace they've felt in decades. When you stop filling every moment with someone else's needs and problems, something incredible happens. You start hearing your own thoughts, really hearing them, not the constant background noise of worry and obligation, but actual thoughts. And these thoughts start asking questions you haven't had time to ask in years. What actually makes me happy? Not what am I supposed to enjoy, but what genuinely brings me joy? Who are the people I actually want to spend time with, not the people I feel obligated to see? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? What do I actually value? These answers don't arrive overnight, but they become easier to hear when your mind isn't completely consumed by meeting someone else's expectations every single moment of the day. As that clarity builds, something shifts in how you see yourself in your life. You start making different choices that protect your peace instead of sacrificing it. You become more selective about who you spend time with. You stop accepting invitations out of obligation. You start saying no without feeling guilty. And here's what's surprising. People respect you more for it. Not everyone, maybe, but the people who matter, the people worth keeping in your life, they respect you more because what they're seeing is someone who actually knows what he wants. Along with that clarity comes something that many senior men don't expect: real peace. Not the kind of peace that depends on everything going perfectly or everyone around you being happy, but a deeper, quieter peace that comes from finally setting down weight that was never yours to carry. Think about how many years you spent trying to keep everyone around you satisfied. How many times did you bite your tongue to avoid conflict? How many of your own needs did you push down to the bottom of the list? I'm not saying that compromise isn't part of any healthy relationship. Of course it is. But there's a huge difference between healthy compromise and spending decades in a constant state of emotional tension. That tension, it does something to a man. It builds slowly enough that he doesn't notice it happening. But over years and years, it affects everything. Your sleep becomes shallow. Your patience gets shorter. Your body starts breaking down earlier than it should. Your enthusiasm for life just gradually deflates, like a tire with a slow leak. And here's the thing, most men think this is just what happens when you get older. They assume that exhaustion and heaviness are just part of aging. But when that weight finally comes off, when a man experiences life without that constant emotional pressure for the first time in decades, he realizes that wasn't age at all. That was stress. That was carrying things he was never meant to carry. When that burden lifts, the change is dramatic. Sleep becomes deeper. You wake up without that immediate dread in your chest. A simple cup of coffee in the morning tastes different when your mind isn't already consumed with problems waiting at home. An evening walk actually feels relaxing, instead of just being another obligation squeezed into a busy day. And many men say the same thing. They didn't realize how exhausted they'd become until they finally experienced what it felt like to rest. Something else happens too. Your energy comes back. And I'm not just talking about having more energy at the end of the day, though that's part of it. I'm talking about recovering the emotional and physical energy that has been slowly drained over years of carrying stress and meeting expectations and constantly adapting to what other people need from you. Stress ages a man in ways that have nothing to do with the calendar. It's written on his face. It's in the way he moves. It's in how much enthusiasm he can bring to anything, even things he used to love. Over time, many men just accept this as inevitable. They think, well, I'm older. I'm supposed to be tired. But often, it's not age that's stealing their vitality. It's the weight they've been carrying. Once that weight comes off, something surprising happens. Men start waking up with motivation again. They take longer walks. They exercise more consistently, not because they feel like they should, but because their body actually has energy again. Some of them travel to places they've been promising themselves they'd visit for 20 years. Others return to hobbies they abandoned somewhere along the way because life got too busy. Some reconnect with old friends they'd lost touch with. Others discover completely new interests and passions. The remarkable part is that none of this happens because someone else changed. It happens because they finally have the space, the emotional and physical space, to invest in themselves again. And that renewed energy reminds them of something really important. Growing older doesn't have to mean growing smaller. Your life doesn't have to get smaller and narrower and less interesting. Sometimes this stage of life becomes the most alive a man has felt in decades, simply because his energy is finally flowing toward his own life instead of being constantly pulled in every direction. As a man begins recovering his energy and his peace, he discovers he's also recovering his dignity, not the kind of dignity that comes from money or status or recognition. Anyone can have that. The real dignity comes from something much deeper. It comes from living according to your own values instead of constantly chasing someone else's approval. Throughout his life, a man probably became accustomed to seeking approval. He worked harder to avoid criticism. He explained himself more than he should have. He spent years trying to keep everyone around him satisfied. And somewhere along the way, he stopped noticing that he was measuring his own worth by how useful he was to other people. Your value became whatever other people decided it was. That's not a healthy way to live. But something changes when a man finally lives on his own terms. He wakes up each morning without needing to justify his decisions or defend his choices. He doesn't need permission to enjoy his own life. He spends time with people who genuinely respect him, and he quietly distances himself from people who constantly bring negativity and unnecessary conflict. Over time, this changes how he sees himself completely. Instead of asking whether he's meeting someone else's standards, he starts asking whether he's living up to his own. That's a simple shift, but it's incredibly powerful because it puts control back where it belongs. When you respect yourself, you're no longer willing to tolerate situations that rob you of peace. You become more selective about where you invest your time and your emotions. You realize that dignity isn't something another person can give you or take away. It's something you protect through the choices you make every single day. And once you start living that way, something happens. Your entire outlook on life changes. You see yourself differently. You see your future differently. You're not just counting down to the end anymore. You're actually living. Here's something else that shifts. Your relationship with time changes completely. For decades, your schedule wasn't really yours. It belonged to your job, your family, your obligations. Your days were organized around what other people needed and expected. By the time you got to the end of each week, there was barely anything left that was actually yours. But once you enter this stage of life, something almost magical happens. Time becomes a luxury. It becomes yours. You don't have to organize every single day around someone else's plans or expectations. You can wake up early to watch the sunrise because you want to, not because you have to get to work. You can spend an afternoon reading a book without feeling guilty about what you're not doing. You can take a spontaneous road trip. You can enjoy an evening of complete silence. You can do these things simply because you want to. What makes this freedom so valuable isn't the activities themselves. It's the ability to choose them. Choice is something most people completely underestimate until they've spent years living without it. When every decision requires negotiation or compromise, even the smallest pleasures start feeling like obligations. But when you get your time back, when you're the one deciding how to spend it, life becomes surprisingly simple again. Those little moments that you rushed past for years, a peaceful morning, a conversation with someone you actually like, learning something new, just sitting quietly with your thoughts. These things become deeply satisfying. After 60, many men realize that the richest life isn't the busiest one. It's the one where your time finally belongs to you, where you have the freedom to spend it in ways that genuinely bring you peace and fulfillment. And as you spend more time living this way, something else develops. Something that might be the most important transformation of all. You develop emotional independence. I want to be clear about what that means, because some people will misunderstand it. This isn't about becoming cold or distant or incapable of loving other people. It's about reaching a point where your emotional stability doesn't depend on someone else's approval or attention or presence. It's about being okay. Actually okay, even if you're alone. For many men, this is literally the first time in their entire lives they experience that kind of freedom. When you're younger, so much of who you are is tied to the roles you play. You're a provider, a husband, a father, the person who holds everything together. While those roles can be meaningful, they can also cause you to lose yourself completely. You become so focused on taking care of everyone else that you never really have the chance to know who you are underneath all of that. But when you live independently, you learn to enjoy your own company without needing to escape it. You discover that being alone and being lonely are completely different things. You become comfortable making decisions on your own, solving your own problems, facing life's challenges without immediately looking for someone else to carry the emotional weight. That quiet self-reliance becomes confidence. Real confidence. And here's something interesting that happens next. Other people start seeing you differently too. The kind of confidence that comes from emotional independence doesn't need attention because it doesn't need anything. It's just calm and steady and authentic. A man who's genuinely comfortable with himself approaches relationships from a position of choice, not dependence, and that changes every single interaction he has. Instead of looking for someone to complete his life, he's just looking for people who make an already meaningful life even better. When you reach that level of independence, you finally have permission to create a future that actually reflects who you've become. For the first time in decades, you can ask yourself the question that was buried beneath responsibility. How do I want to spend the years I have left? Not how am I supposed to spend them? How do I actually want to? For so much of life, the answer to that question is shaped by other people. Your career decisions are controlled by financial obligations. Your free time is organized around family responsibilities. Even simple choices about where to live or how to travel or what hobbies to pursue require compromise with someone else. Maybe those sacrifices were necessary at the time, but in this new chapter, something extraordinary becomes possible. Complete freedom to choose your own direction. Some men finally take the trip they postponed for decades. Others start learning skills they've always been curious about. Some volunteer in their communities or mentor younger men. Others finally pursue creative passions they never had time for. The specific activity doesn't matter as much as the fact that every decision is driven by what you actually want, not by obligation or expectation. That sense of direction changes how a man sees himself. He stops feeling like his life is winding down. It feels like a new chapter is finally beginning. Instead of looking back at what he's lost, he's looking forward to what he can still build. And that's the greatest advantage of all. A man who discovers real purpose later in life often lives with a level of gratitude and confidence and fulfillment that many people spend their entire lives searching for, but never actually find. So here's what I want you to understand. This isn't about telling you that relationships are bad or that being single is the only way to be happy. Healthy relationships can bring love and support and companionship that genuinely enriches life in beautiful ways. But what I am saying is that your worth as a man does not depend on whether someone is beside you. For many senior men, the greatest discovery after 60 isn't a new relationship. It's rediscovering themselves. They learn that peace isn't something another person gives you. Confidence isn't something you have to earn from someone else's approval. Purpose doesn't disappear when your kids grow up or your career ends. These things have always existed inside you. They just become easier to recognize once the noise finally quiets down. That's why so many men describe this stage of life as one of the happiest they've ever experienced. They're no longer living according to expectations that were written decades ago. They have the freedom to decide how they spend their time, who they welcome into their lives, and what kind of future they want to create. So let me ask you something real. If your life truly belonged to you from this day forward, what would you choose?